Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation, Seeing Success, Ensuring Healthy Vision for Infants and Toddlers. My name is Steve Ziemba. I am the Social Media Marketing Manager for Midwestern University and its clinics. I will be the monitor for today's presentation. And before we jump into the presentation, some quick housekeeping items before we get started. The first being, if you have any questions at any point during the presentation, please feel free to ask. Whether you are watching on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, simply share your question in the comment section and I will be moderating those questions and serving it up to Dr. Prestwich. We are recording today's presentation. It will be available for replay on Midwestern University's YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn channels. And then one final note, I would like to thank our partner, the Downers Grove Public Library, for supporting today's event. So thank you very much. We appreciate the partnership with the library. At this point, I'd like to welcome Dr. Clinton Prestwich, who will be leading today's discussion. Dr. Prestwich, welcome, and I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you. So, hello, everybody. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk today and answer some questions about healthy vision for our little ones. So just a little bit about me. I am an assistant professor at the Chicago College of Optometry at Midwestern University. I teach courses here didactically to our optometry students, and I also see patients in our pediatric and vision therapy services at our Eye Institute, at the Multi-Specialty Institute. So this is what I do. I see kids all day and I teach. So I'm excited to talk about this topic. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about today and kind of discuss with everybody is just the idea of the importance of vision. So why are we even having this conversation? So really, vision is essential for learning and development. And what do I mean by that? So if we have disruptions in our visual system or in our eyes, then those disruptions can result in a lot of different problems and issues. One of those things that problems with our vision can result in is a disruption of normal childhood development. So as humans, we are kind of visual creatures. Vision is our primary sense. We use our visual system to interact with the world all the time. And so if our visual system is compromised in any way, then that can impede overall development, not just development of our visual system, but the development of our children in general. And so that is one of the reasons that it's so important that we take care of our eyes and we take care of our visual system and we learn everything we can about it so that we can ensure that our visual system is developing correctly, and that will assist with our children to develop the way that they should as well. If we have issues with our visual system, then it can also lead to reduced school performance. So the easiest example of this is, if a child has blurry vision, it's going to be tough for them to read. It's going to be tough for them to succeed in school and to learn the things that they need to learn. Sight is necessary for reading, and reading is necessary for learning. And so one of the first things that we need to ensure for our children is that they have good, clear vision so they can have good school performance. Additionally, problems with our vision can lead to impaired social interaction. Children are very smart. They're very aware of their world around them. And when they perceive things differently than others, they notice. If someone describes something one way and they don't see that, they notice. And that can impede their social interactions with their peers and with their friends. And that in turn can then lead to poor self-esteem. So these are just a few examples of why we're even having this conversation and why we're talking about the importance of vision today. Next slide. So we know visual issues occur. How common are they? How prevalent are they in the population? There's a lot of different studies and a lot of different research that has gone into try to find out exactly how common these things are. But the American Optometric Association estimates that there is 1 in 5 preschool children that have vision problems. About 20% of kids that are preschool age have some type of vision issue, which is extremely high for any type of disorder or problem. In addition to that, once kids get to school age, about 25% of kids who are in school wear some type of corrective lenses, which again is a very high number, and this is why we're having this conversation today. Next slide. So we're talking about these issues, we're talking about what they are and that they're common and that they can affect our development. So what are we talking about here? What exactly are some examples of some common vision problems? So first thing we're going to talk about is something called hyperopia. So there's a little graph here on the left, or a little image, I should say, that's talking about being farsighted. So farsightedness is a very, very common vision problem. In fact, it's the most common refractive error in our kids. Actually, most kids should be a little bit farsighted. So if you've taken your kids to the eye doctor, they might say, oh, your child is a little bit farsighted, and that's fine. And that's absolutely true, 100% true. If most children should be just a little bit farsighted, because what farsighted means is that they can see clearly at all distances. They just have to work harder when they look at things up close. And so if they just have to work a little bit harder, it's no big deal. In fact, that's what we want them to do. We want them to be just a little tiny bit farsighted, and because that leads to best outcomes long term. So don't ever be alarmed if you ever hear from your eye doctor or another doctor that your child's a little bit farsighted. That's totally normal and common and needed. The next thing there is myopia. So this is probably the one you're more familiar with. So myopia is another term for nearsightedness. So nearsighted is when you can only see things up close. So you are nearsighted. So to fix that, we have to use glasses. So that's what you can see that image there in the middle. There's a tree refracting through that eye, and that tree, it focuses at a point in front of the back of the eye. So that means that when the image gets to the back of the eye, it's a little bit blurry. And so we can use lenses and contact lenses to change where that image falls so it lands in the right spot, so now it's clear. So children who are nearsighted, they can't see things far away, and they need glasses to do that. Another refractive error problem is something called astigmatism. Now that's kind of a scary word. I hear a lot of parents will say, I hear my child has astigmatism, and it just sounds kind of scary. But in reality, I would say probably, and this is not a research number, just my clinical experience tells me about 90% of my patients have some type of astigmatism. And a lot of astigmatism doesn't need to be corrected. It's a small amount, and I don't need to do anything about it. But what it is the fact that our eyes are not perfectly round. So it means that the front part of our eye is not perfectly spherical. So there's one part of it's more curved than the other. So that means that as the light passes through the eye, it doesn't focus in one spot, but it rather spreads out just a little bit. And again, a little bit of that is normal. And if you have a small amount of astigmatism, that is normal, and you probably don't need glasses. We only need to correct for it when it becomes significant. Another thing that's very, very common is something called strabismus. So strabismus is an eye turn. And those eye turns can be up or down or right or left or in and out, whatever it might be. It's a very common eye condition. Strabismus can happen all of the time, meaning that the eye is always turned out or turned in, or it can be some of the time. So sometimes parents will come in and they say, I think I'm going crazy because I look at my child and sometimes their eye is out and sometimes it's straight. And sometimes I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I'm just imagining it, but they're not imagining it. It's true. Sometimes the eyes can be straight and sometimes they'll turn a little bit. They'll turn out or in. That's a very common condition. And there's a lot of things that we can do to help with that. If you have a strabismus that's constant, that's always occurring, that can lead to something called lazy eye. So a lazy eye is when the connections between the brain and the eye don't develop the way that they should. And what can cause that is a strabismus, or really maybe also really high refractive error, things like that, that basically that eye isn't used the way that it should be throughout development. So when the child is growing and developing, that eye isn't being used the way that it should be. And so the connections between the eye and the brain don't develop in the way that they should. And so even if you give the best pair of glasses, that eye is a little bit lazy, meaning it doesn't see as well as it should, given all the other circumstances. And so we want to try to prevent that as much as we can. And that's one of the reasons why we recommend eye exams so early, is to catch any of these conditions that could possibly lead to lazy eye or amblyopia. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about is something called convergence insufficiency. So a big part of what I do in pediatric optometry and binocular vision is to look for the ability of the eyes to work together as a team. So we have two eyes, and they have to be pointing to the same thing for us to be able to see singly, right? If they're pointing to different things, we're going to see two images. We're not going to see the same thing. And so we need to be our eyes need to work seamlessly as a team. And one of the conditions that cause our eyes to not work together as a team is something called convergence insufficiency. So convergence insufficiency, what that is when we have a difficulty turning our eyes inward to look at things up close. So when we read or we look at objects up close, our eyes have to come in, right? They have to turn inward to see things clearly and singly up close. Like when we read, if struggle to do that, or they can't do that for a long period of time, then someone has this condition called convergence insufficiency. And again, it's something, there's a lot of different treatments we have for that, but it's something that we look for. Okay. Next slide. So those are some conditions that I'm looking for as a doctor, but what, as a parent, what can you be looking for that might be signs or symptoms of these conditions that I just went over? Most common one is blurry vision. If kids ever mention things like, the board's not clear at school, or they say they can't see something that you can see, that's a pretty good indicator that they have something going on with their visual system that they should get checked out. Headaches and eye strain, very, very common symptoms for things like convergence insufficiency or other eye teaming problems. So because they have to work so hard to keep their eyes pointing in the same direction, they develop things like headaches and eye strain. Squinting one eye is another common symptom of strabismus, actually. So if you have an eye that's turned out, we're seeing double. The child will often just squint an eye, they'll shut it, so they don't see double anymore. That's a very, very common symptom. And if you're seeing that frequently in your child, you should probably get them an eye exam. Another thing that goes along with that is, two other things that go along with that is poor depth perception and double vision. So if, again, with strabismus or poor eye teaming, if the children are not able to use their eyes together as a team correctly, they probably have poor depth perception, because we need two eyes to have really good depth perception. And they might report even having seen double. And I've had kids as young as 3 or 4 report saying, I see 2 of that. I see 2 letters. I see 2 screens. I see 2 of your face, whatever it might be. They report that. That's actually a common thing that they'll say, I see 2 of that, when they know there's only 1. So those are things to look out for as a parent. Next slide. Okay, before we get into what to do, any questions so far? We've gone over a lot of information. Any questions come in from the audience that we want to discuss before we
Yeah, I do see some questions coming in. Let me bring up one of these questions on the screen here. Let's see.
So the question, can vision problems in young children go undetected without an eye exam? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, unfortunately. So if you take your child to their regular pediatrician visits, typically what they're going to be doing, they're going to be doing some type of eye screening. Mm-hmm. And that screening, they'll usually cover an eye and you read a letter chart, and they can read off the letters, and they cover the other eye and they read the letters on the chart. That doesn't measure how the eyes are working together as a team, for example. So that measures the ability of the eye to see clearly one at a time. So it's good at catching things like nearsightedness, but not so good at catching things like strabismus or eye teaming issues, or even farsightedness. So they can go undetected if you don't have a complete eye exam.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Great. And then one more question here regarding, let's see. Can an eye exam detect other health issues besides vision problems?
Yes, actually, that's a great question. So the eye is so cool because it gives us kind of a window to the rest of the body. Now, that's me as an eye doctor saying eye is cool, so take that with a grain of salt. But I think it's great. And it gives us kind of a window to how the rest of the body is functioning. So we don't see this as often in kids, but in adults, we'll see signs of diabetes, high blood pressure, things like that before the person even knows they have those types of conditions. So in adults, that's very, very common. In kids, we can sometimes find things that are actually very serious. And so sometimes I've done an eye exam and seen evidence of tumors in the brain or in the eye, and I make the proper referral so that they can get that care taken care of. So yes, we can. They are important for a lot of different reasons, not just for the visual system, but also for other more systemic issues as well.
Good. Yeah, good to know. Let's no other comments or questions have come in at this point, so let's move on to the next slide.
All right. So what I want to talk about next, I want to just 3 really easy things. So when I talk with parents and I have these children in my exam chair, they always want to know what they can do, and to make sure that their children's vision is developing the way that it should, or that they can manage any conditions that may already be present. And so I wanted to just talk about some 3 really easy things that I always mention. So first, we want to ensure early and regular comprehensive eye examinations. So I really recommend, and the American Optometric Association recommends this, and I recommend this as well, that the first eye exam should happen between the ages of 6 to 12 months old. And that always is kind of surprising to people. They're like, what do you mean you can do an eye exam on a 6-month-old? And absolutely, yes, 100%. We're looking for big things at those visits. We're not asking a 6-month-old, which is better, 1 or 2, obviously. But we're looking for big things. We're looking for significant refractive error. we're looking for eye turns, and we're looking for big ocular health issues like tumors. That's really what we're looking for. And we're looking for those things because if we don't catch them early, then things like amblyopia or lazy eye can develop. And so that's why we recommend that we do it so early. And we have objective ways of measurement, meaning I don't have to ask the infant any questions, right? There's lights that I use, there's special instruments and tests that I run to judge these, to make these assessments. The infant doesn't have to do anything. A really cool idea, however, with these infant exams is that there's a program called Infancy. So that's a program, it's a public health program from the American Optometric Association. And it covers the cost of eye exams for children aged 6 to 12 months, 100%. So if you have a child aged 6 to 12 months, you can take them to an infancy provider and they'll have a free eye exam. No cost to you at all. Now, if they have to have glasses, then that's a different story, but the exam itself would be totally free. And so if you want to find an infancy provider, you can we are providers at Midwestern University, but you can always just go to infancy.org and there's a doctor locator there and you can type in, you just look for a doctor that's close to you and they'll do a free infant exam for your baby. Yeah, thank you. So first eye exam between 6 and 12 months. After that, we recommend at least one exam between the ages of 3 to 5. So those preschool years, at least one exam during that time. In the state of Illinois, where we are, that's actually required by the state of Illinois that these children get an eye exam before going to kindergarten. And so we're lucky that that law exists because we're able to examine all children as they enter kindergarten to make sure that they're ready and they don't have any of these conditions that can lead to problems later on. And after that, I would recommend that they get annual exams from the ages 6 to 18. So once they're in school, once they're school age, you want to take them in for their annual exam because kids' eyes change. Just like the rest of them, their eyes grow, they develop, they change. And so we want to make sure we're catching any changes that may be going for the worse instead of the better and adjust as needed. Next slide. So this slide is a little bit different. So this one I kind of want to talk about. It's not less eye related, it's more visual system related and visual development. So this is the advice that I give to my parents of really small children. So we really want to encourage a visually guided movement. Now, what do I mean by that? So as I mentioned before, we are visual creatures. Our vision, our sense of sight is our dominant sense. We really interact with the world and derive meaning from the world through our sense of sight primarily. Now, obviously we have other senses that add meaning to our understanding of the world, but sight is our primary sense. And because of that, it's the one that primarily guides movement. And so when I'm telling parents how they can encourage their children to have a good visual system, this is one of the things I always recommend. And it's to encourage a visually guided movement. And what do I mean by that? Things like playing catch. So playing catch is actually a fairly complicated visual task if you think about it. You're throwing a ball, they have to track the speed, the location, the elevation of that ball as it's coming towards them, and then they have to react with their body to place their hands in the correct position to catch that ball. So it's a great task. Obviously, you're not going to be throwing a baseball at your toddler's head, but playing catch with stuffed animals or large balls and things like that is a great tool to help encourage the proper development of their visual system. Popping bubbles is similar. So popping bubbles, it requires good depth perception, good visual tracking, and good hand-eye coordination to pop those bubbles. Puzzles is a little bit different. So puzzles, it goes beyond just the ability to track objects and predict where they're going to be, and it goes into different skills and abilities in visual perception and what we call visual information processing. So once our eyes gather all the visual information in the world, our brain then has to interpret them correctly and make judgments about them and discriminate. This is a circle, this is a square, this is a cloud, this is a tree, whatever it might be. We have to make those decisions and our brain makes those decisions. And so puzzles help children with that. They learn to see a part of something and recognize it's part of a greater whole. And they can make those connections and develop those visual processes in a better way. And finally, we encourage blocks. Blocks are great. They encourage creativity, hand-eye coordination, and again, it kind of also helps that visual information processing where they can see this piece can go here and stack here because it fits there. And they're able to make those judgments. So those are some great, just some visually guided motor movements to help encourage the proper development of the visual system.
Great. Yeah, appreciate that. And questions come in, and you probably get this one a lot, is how do handheld devices affect the
Yeah,
development of eyesight, right?
it
Everyone's
is.
big topic of discussion always. One's too young,
Yeah,
so
that is
how does that affect eyesight development?
that is a really really great question, and unfortunately the jury's still out. So there's a lot of correlation studies, and that means that so we see some associations between um, you know development of nearsightedness with a lot of near device use or screen time.
Mhm.
Um, and anecdotally, in my personal clinical experience, I find that children who are on devices a lot, they might have poor visual development
Mhm.
because they're not interacting with the world. The screen is not a real world. It's not a real thing. And so to encourage proper development, I would do as much as we can to encourage interaction with the real world rather than a screen,
Yeah.
and to limit screen time as much as possible. I know kids hate it when I say that in the exam room, but
Depends on
that
the
is
answer.
probably the most common question that I get in the exam room is
Yeah.
how much is too much? And I don't ever usually get a straight answer. I just say less is probably better.
Everything in moderation.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. And finally here, the last piece of advice that I typically give to parents is to encourage time spent outdoors. And I say that safely. You don't want to send your kid out without sunscreen or like just banish them to 90-degree weather for like 8 hours, right? So encourage time spent outdoors safely. And the reason why I say that is that the prevalence of nearsightedness is growing, meaning, several years ago, there was X% of nearsighted people in the country, and now it's significantly more. And in fact, there's the global agencies have called it an epidemic of nearsightedness. And we don't know exactly why. There's a lot of postulations. Some people think that it's because of the near device use and computer use and things like that. Some people think it's evolution or lots of other, there's a lot of theories. I'm not going to go into all of that. But we do know that there is a negative correlation with time spent outside, meaning the more time you spend outside, the less likely you are to become nearsighted. And there's been several studies that have shown that. This is one I just posted. I kind of did a screenshot of this one here, kind of a recent one, that time spent outdoors in childhood associated with reduced risk of myopia as an adult. So then the little tagline down here at the bottom, the conclusion sentence says that spending more time outdoors in both childhood and adolescence was associated with less myopia in young adulthood. Now, this is association. This is not causation, meaning there's no guarantee that if you spend tons of time outside that they're not going to become nearsighted. However, there's very little drawback to spending time outside. And so if I can try to improve my child's chances of not developing nearsightedness, then I'm going to do it. And this is one of the best ways that we know to do that, is to spend time outdoors.
Great.
Okay. That's kind of the prepared stuff I had. What are the questions?
Yeah, so quite a few questions coming in around just the exam, right? So
Sure.
taking your child to an eye doctor. Let's take a look here. Probably a good one here is just, hey, what can I expect during a back to school eye exam? How long is it going to take? What is that process? What does that look like? Because obviously you're going into a situation that's a lot different than going to your pediatrician,
Right.
or whatever. So how's that differ? How's it similar maybe?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So back to school eye exam is pretty straightforward. It doesn't take that long. We're looking for a few major things. We're looking first to see how your child can see clearly. So we're checking the refractive error of the eye to see if they have any nearsightedness, farsightedness, astigmatism, things like that. So that's going to involve reading the eye chart.
Mhm.
That's going to involve maybe using the phoropter, which is that kind of, you saw, there was a picture of it earlier. It's that big giant pair of glasses that sits in front of their face. They may use that, they may not. For some, I don't use it often for my littlest children because it kind of scares them sometimes. But they may use that. But we're just going to be checking their prescription. Now, again, as we mentioned before, we don't need to ask kids which is better, 1 or 2. And they may not even do that. And they probably won't for this back, if they're less than 6, I usually don't go into that too much. Okay. There's other ways. We shine lights in their eyes. We measure how the light is moving inside the eye with lenses to know what their prescription is. So they don't have to tell us anything. They just have to watch a movie. We put a movie on the screen. They're watching the movie. We measure with lights. So it's pretty low stakes for them. It's not too stressful for them. Other things that we measure, we look at 3D vision. That's what this picture is here.
Mm-hmm.
We're measuring 3D vision to make sure their eyes are working together correctly as a team. We'll also do some other basic measurements of eye movement and eye health. So we'll use a microscope to look at their eyes to make sure they're healthy. And we'll probably dilate the eye we'll put some drops in to dilate the eye to make sure the back of the eye is healthy as well.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yep. Great. And then, of course, knowing what happens during an exam, is there, kind of best practices around how do you prepare your child? Obviously, you have young children, so it's
Yeah,
a
I
little bit
do.
easier for you because they know maybe what you do, and so you probably talk about it over dinner in the evenings. But how do you prepare your child for
That's
that?
a really that's a really great question. You know, I have found that first of all, you tell them there's no shots. So I can't tell you how many times
Good point.
I walk into an exam and they say, "When's the shot?" They ask me. They like haven't talked to their parents about it at all. They want to know from me, when do I get the shot? I'm like, no, there's no shots today. So that always makes them really happy. Like, there's no shots today. So they're usually pretty happy about that. So you can always let them know there's no shots. There's going to be a lot of lights, and sometimes the lights are a little bit bright, but they don't hurt. So there's some bright lights, but they don't hurt. And then I think, in my opinion, it's better to prepare them that they might have to put some drops in their eyes. That scares kids, and that's kind of like this inherent, I guess, instinctual. They don't like water in their eyes, right? They've learned early that if you open your eyes underwater, it doesn't feel great, and so the idea of purposely putting drops in their eyes is kind of scary for them. And so I found that it's actually a pretty good prep to let them know beforehand. And you know your child best. You know your child best if it's better to like prepare them or just spring it on them. But I think in general, it's probably better to prepare them, let them know there probably are going to be some drops, and it's not the worst thing in the world. And if it does hurt, it hurts very, very briefly, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It mostly just feels a little bit cold, and it doesn't change things much. But that's probably what I'd recommend. That you kind of let them know the drops are coming, because when you spring it on them in the exam, they get a little. Then there's lots of tears. And I will say, in an eye exam for really small children, there's usually some tears, especially when you put drops in.
Sure.
But it doesn't last very long, and they forgive you quickly.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway here is no shots, right? At least.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. You tell them there's no shots at this one.
You're like,
we're all of a sudden no shots. That's great.
Right. Again, exam questions coming up. If my child fails an exam or is diagnosed with a vision problem, like, what can I expect? What is that next step? What happens? What does that next step look like?
That's a really great question. Sometimes it's as simple as glasses. We'll say, your child needs glasses. Here are some glasses. Go and it's really interesting when you have a child who maybe has parents who don't wear glasses, and their child gets glasses. They're like, how does that work? Like, what do we mean? Like, how do I get glasses?
Right.
How does that work? So that process. So you'll get a prescription, and you can take that prescription anywhere. Most of the places you're going to go get your eyes checked are going to have an optical associated with their clinic. But if not, you can take that prescription anywhere. Just like you can take a drug prescription to any pharmacy, you can take your glasses prescription to any optical. Mm-hmm. And then you can get that. You take it to them, and you pick out the frame that you want, and then the optician will go over some lens options with you. And those lens options, there's the material, and there's anti-reflective coatings, all kinds of things you can do with the lens itself. But that doesn't change the power of the lens. And those are just decisions that you can make as a parent or a purchaser of those glasses. And then they'll take the frames, they'll send them off to the lab, or sometimes they make them in-house, but it takes about, I would say, a week to 2 weeks is probably most average to actually make the glasses. Mm-hmm. And then they'll let you know when they've arrived, and you show up, and you can they'll try the glasses on, make sure they fit okay, and make sure you're seeing okay out of them, and then you go home with them. So that's how the glasses process works. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Eye Institute actually has eyeglass fulfillment services. Is that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and Midwestern, we definitely have that ability. We have we have a huge range of frames, being from really affordable to really kind of high-end frames, and they do a really great job. We have wonderful opticians that really work with you to make sure that the glasses are what you want, and they fit well, and you're seeing well out of them.
Gotcha. If you have your prescription filled elsewhere, would you recommend that the parent and child come back into the institute just to check the prescription and make sure everything fits correctly? Is that something that is an option within the?
That's a great question. It's definitely an option. If the glasses aren't made at the place where you got your exam, it's harder for us to know exactly what happened. We can tell you if they're not made right, and then you have to go back to the place you had them made. Okay. So that is one benefit of doing it wherever you get your eye exam, doing it in-house, because then there's more continuity of what happened with those glasses. A lot of people also get like glasses online, and it's an option. It's not a great option because it's hard, especially for kids. It's hard to measure eyes correctly with computer programs. But if you bring in your glasses, we're always happy to measure them
Mhm.
and to see if they're made right. And we might tell you they're made wrong. And then,
Okay.
then
But yeah, better safe than sorry, right? Make
Yep.
sure that everything is
Yep, absolutely.
checks out. And then we're just about at our 30-minute mark here. I do have another question that's come in more specifically about actually in school itself. So my child's in school. What precautions, safety measures can they take to protect their child's eyes while at school? Obviously, younger age within the classroom, they're in gym, they're outside, they have recess. What are some of those safety measures that they think about at least?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I would just say, if you are ever participating in an activity that recommends the use of protective eyewear, use it.
Mm-hmm.
Use it. Things like racquetball or even in baseball.
Probably pickleball these days.
Yeah, pickleball. Anything that has a small ball that would fit here,
Mm-hmm.
that's something you might want to consider wearing eye protection.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many times I've seen kids after, it's usually the week after Christmas or the end of the year, and everyone got a bunch of Nerf guns. And how many times kids have taken a Nerf dart to the eye.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have those types of things, just be sure, like that old adage of like, don't point at your face. That's real. Like, please don't point things at your face. Don't shoot things at people's faces. That's kind of, it seems like really non-specific, but that's really kind of my best advice. Yeah. And if any sport or activity recommends eye protection, then definitely do it. There's a reason it's recommended, and it's because it's been an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great tips. Again, we're just at about our 30-minute time here. So again, Dr. Prestwich, thank you for your time. Thank you for this presentation. This has been very informative. And again, the Midwestern University Eye Institute is located in Downers Grove. Our information's on the screen if you're interested in learning more about our Eye Institute or would like to give us a call and ask, maybe schedule an appointment. The information's there. Again, we've recorded today's presentation. You'll be able to find it on YouTube, LinkedIn, and our Facebook channel. But again, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today. And again, thank you to our partner, the Downers Grove Public Library, for supporting this initiative. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.